everyone. Welcome to Wellness Wednesdays with Stephanie. I'm Stephanie Buckland, your host, and I am delighted to be interviewing my friend and colleague Cynthia Young today. She's the owner of Asteya Studios, which is a feng shui business, and I'm just so delighted for you to be here today, Cynthia. Thanks so much.
It's exciting to be here. Thanks for having me on. I know you're part of the collective that really is trying to put wellness in the forefront in Arizona.
Yes, I want more people to know that healing is possible. That's kind of the whole idea. Absolutely. So I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your business, and how a little bit of your magic shows up in the world.
We love showing up in the world. Thank you. My name is Cynthia Young, and as you said, I own Asteya Studios. I've been in business for about 3 years. I started out graduating Feng Shui school and coming out of that, starting to go into people's homes and work with them on arranging their space. Feng Shui literally translates to wind and water. So we go in with the idea that we want things to be flowing in the living space. And as I was walking in and through houses early on, I discovered that there was a lot of similar patterns showing up. There was patterns of grief, there were patterns of clutter, there were obstacles that were very, very prevalent where people were just feeling frustrated. So I went back, I started to do some research and realized I could go back to school for a trauma certification, trauma support, because I wanted to know what was at the heart of what was going on. I'm a 50-year trauma survivor. I had a stroke at a very young age, right before first grade. And that left me with a dysregulated nervous system for my entire life. And I was well into my 40s and 50s before I realized that something was going on. And what I was seeing when I walked into houses was people bracing, people armoring, people having grief moments. So I wanted to put the two things together because I knew there was an opportunity to have people heal in their spaces. Um, so I've been pretty successful in the state of Arizona in working with some folks overseas as clients. I do virtual work and in person. So that's where I'm at the moment and really trying to bring those two worlds together.
That is so cool. I love that you're blending feng shui and trauma together because I know personally, if my space gets too cluttered, it drives me crazy and I can feel it. I feel like this low level of stress that's just in my body and will not go away until the clutter is dealt with. And I will let it just sit there. So that is a habit, obviously, or maybe a habit that hasn't developed yet of keeping my space in a place of cleanliness and feng shui and beauty. Um, so I'd love to talk a little more about clutter and just, the guilt and the shame attached to it. You mentioned that just briefly. Why do we get this way? Why do we do this?
Well, when we practice feng shui, we go into the space and we divide it into 9 sectors, and that's called a bagua. It's the energy map that we use in feng shui. There are a couple different schools of feng shui that use it differently, but we use it as a 9 sector map. So when I walk into a space, I might look at a particular section of the house and say, "Gee, what's going on in this relationship?" If there's clutter in the bedroom, I want to know what's the barrier to intimate relationships, not even love relationships, but partnerships that are close. It could be business, it could be family. We're not just talking about love. If I see that the person is having financial trouble and there's a lot of debris in the backyard in the far left corner of the space, I want to know what's going on financially. Where are we building prosperity and wealth, and where are we not? So when people have clutter, the first thing I look at is it causing a problem? Is it causing a problem in the space? Then we have data to work with, and we can say, where is it and why is it there?
Right.
Sometimes there are emotions coming up in the space. So we might work with that and say, I realize, you're grieving right now, or you've been through some events in your life that are kind of hanging on emotionally. So we may start to work with the present day behavior to say, why are we building this kind of barrier of clutter? I know in a former life, I lived a very different life in a very different space that was very cluttered. And there was a lot of perimeter clutter that basically was a barrier to all the emotions in this relationship that were coming up that we weren't dealing with.
Hmm.
So looking back now, I see why that happened. Sometimes people get nervous system dysregulation from traumatic experiences. You know, trauma is not the event that happened, but it's what's left in our bodies, where our bodies are trying to tell us that we're still in threat. So when we deal with things in the space like chaos, like visual clutter, too much multisensory experiences going on, we tend to shut down because our system sees it as a threat.
Hmm.
So when we to make the wellness connection, when we complete that threat response or have that mobilization again and again, our bodies are producing stress hormones, and that affects us at a cellular level, as you know, and then we get sick. So environment affects our physiology. It has a giant impact. And part of understanding our wellness is understanding the attunement we have to have to our space.
For sure. Yeah. I can tell walking into a space that there's energy in that space that's not attached to the humans. It's attached to maybe past experiences in the space or energy that's just latent and stuck. And I would imagine that clutter definitely does that, especially since, you can have an object and have energy attached to that object. So, man, I mean, we could talk for hours about this stuff.
Absolutely. And it's not so much the abundance of our stuff. People love to say, "Oh, you have too much stuff." It's our relationship to that abundance and how we manage it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, you mentioned something before we hit record. Don't get caught in that trap. What did you mean by that?
It's really easy to call yourself lazy. It's really easy to use language with yourself that isn't gentle when you think your space should look a different way. We get very disconnected from our spaces because we get busy with life. We get in the hustle culture. We do all of the things that our nervous system is prompting us to do because we don't feel safe. So we fall out of connection with the space. I ask my clients if they have clutter to sit in the space. Sit in the space that has clutter, but the most relative safety. And I want to know what falls away for you. Because in my eyes, clutter should take care of itself organically if we're connecting to the space. So to put ourselves or to put a perfect home on a pedestal is really self-sabotaging because we're going to live in our spaces. Our space should support us and it should be comfortable to experience whatever we need to experience.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, life is so full and so much, there's just so much to life. And I mean, I could see how living in a space, you basically disconnect from it because you're not there all the time, first of all. And secondly, like if I don't own this, then I don't have to be affected by it. That whole like disconnect. This is
Well,
not my mess,
we were
you know?
talking about, yes, and we were talking about clutter, and I think that sometimes clutter is a deflection for whatever we're resisting feeling.
Right.
If we are, so for instance, in a former relationship of mine that wasn't feeling so good, well, there was compulsive shopping. There was bringing things into the space that really were extra, that really were unneeded things, to try and deflect and mask the fact that there was all this hurt going on. And people experience that, I think, at different levels. And then if it's something that's affected us in the past and still causing present behavior, we need to look at the layers of that because it's oftentimes dynamic.
Hmm. Man, yeah, it's so just fascinating how our environment affects our well-being. So we talked about living ecology and attunement to our environment. So I'd love to dive a little deeper into that too. And just like the reflections that are in our spaces of our experiences. I think it's just so interesting. So let's chat a little bit about that.
You know, when we bring up the, I was a meditation teacher for a long time on the East Coast, and you know, we always talk about mindfulness, we always talk about being present in our bodies. Really, when you talk about the living ecology, it becomes how are you attuned to your space so that it supports you. I have severe startle response from my medical trauma. I have auditory sensitivities, lots of stuff going on that can really put me in a place of anxiety and put me in a place of really having to deal with a response. So I do things in my house to support myself. The textures are soft, the corners are often rounded. If we have a 90-degree angle American architecture door or wall, we might want to soften that with a plant or some other type of piece of furniture. Um, I have soft textures. I have nesting spaces where I can just have an oasis, where I can say, stop the multisensory and let's go over here and give my parasympathetic nervous system a chance to react. There's a great author. Her name is Dr. Shelley James, and she's worked with NASA. She's a lighting expert. And if you listen to her, she says the eyes are the precursor to behavior. So if I walk into a space and there's all this fractured artwork or fractured mirrors hanging and lots of visual clutter on the counters, I'm not sure where to put my attention first. My eyes are bringing in information at small milliseconds, hundreds and hundreds of pieces of information. It doesn't know what to decide on. So that's going to cause an emotional response or some body bracing for me.
Right.
So the visual clutter is really important in terms of cognitive pressure.
My little dog is here with us. And he's making noises. So,
Okay.
like,
Hello,
oh,
dear.
mom, pay attention to
So
me.
so pets are fire animals in Feng Shui. So we have a little fire element going on.
Yep. And he's definitely feeling the fire right now because he's like, Mom, pay attention, Mom, pay attention.
He wants
Oh my
attunement,
goodness.
right?
Yeah, probably edit that part out.
Yeah.
Mwah. I
Hi.
love you, little dog. Okay. Oh, let's see. You gave me a quote. What are you hitching your wagon to?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like that. So, um, God, that goes back to ancient, like our time when we were traveling in wagons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little more.
So I'm doing a presentation. I'm part of the International Feng Shui Guild, and we do conferences each year. This particular virtual one is this Thursday and Friday, the 18th and 19th. Uh, One of the things that I talk about in my presentation is what are you hitching your wagon to? So when I walk in your space, is it a celebration of you? If I walk in, can I point to a piece of artwork or point to an arrangement of your furniture and say, gee, that makes me feel like you're really conversational, or you're very interested in traveling to these different places that I see pictures of? Oftentimes we are preconditioned with patterns and behaviors and people pleasing so that we decorate our houses or arrange our houses according to what we think is right based on our conditioned response. And that follows us through everything we do in our life. It follows us with finances, it follows us with relationships. So I might say, let's see, I had a client who had a picture over her couch of this sort of foggy forest. And I'm like, what do you like about that picture? And she said, well, it's just something that I think should be there. It's a landscape, it's calm. Okay, but to me, it shows indecision and unexpectedness because there's this foggy area where you're not making a decision, you're not being intentional. So we had to talk about switching the artwork out and putting that lovely painting somewhere else in a space where she needed decision making and to be intentional. She needed something symbolically to point to that. When we practice feng shui, we look to be really intentional with color, with furniture placement, so that it supports us. So when I say, what are you hitching your wagon to, it becomes who are you creating your space for? And are you still trying to fix something that you think was lacking previously? Sometimes when we are trying to be the good kid, or we're trying to be the sophisticated woman as a teenager or in our 20s, we try to recreate that in the space. When really, I want to know what's celebrating you today. How are you showing up in this space? Because really, your space is a template for how you show up. Oh, I can't hear. There you
Okay.
are.
Yeah, I just recently moved into this office,
Mm,
and so it was an empty room with a couple of pieces of furniture, and I was like, okay, I can play with this space and make it my own, which I've never really had moving when I moved into this house.
sure.
This space was filled with a kid. So now it's not. Now the kid's gone, and I've got an opportunity here to make a healing sanctuary.
Hmm, hmm.
And I'm seeing patterns that I've created in the past that I'm like, wait, this is how people will perceive me, because this is like a healing space people can come to.
Hmm.
And what am I putting in this space that I don't want people to see? Or
Hmm.
that it's inappropriate to be here somehow. So that's all that judgment going on, right?
Yeah, well, and discerning, discerning is a really good word, because we start to look at the things around us and it's, how does that affect me? Have I blocked myself off from receiving, which is sometimes the case because we love to make ourselves small.
Mhm.
I always say, where are your treasures buried? Is everything around the things you love in the way? And are you shrinking from that authentic self? Because we deserve to take up space. We
Yes.
deserve to take up space in our homes, and all the things we love deserve to take up space, but we make them really small.
Hmm.
And that's a self-worth kind of self-actualization, I think, that we have to work with at
Yeah.
different levels. Mhm,
Yeah, when I moved in, I was moving in to somebody else's home.
mhm,
So it did feel like I needed to play small because I didn't want my stuff everywhere,
sure,
and
sure.
even moving in, I had to make sure that the boxes were not everywhere, that they were like stored in the garage and then one at a time, bring them in, and so spaces are interesting things. It's been quite a process to be in this space and to
Mm.
learn how to really fully be in my own space and
What were
feel
the
like it's
thing?
mine.
What were the things you brought into your healing space that made it feel like your life's purpose?
Let's see. So my vision board is in front of me.
Mm,
I have
mhm,
my crystals in here. Um, my favorite chair is behind me, that
mm,
chair behind
mm,
me. And my partner said she wants green in here, which I appreciate, more
mm,
living plants. So that's the poor little plant back there.
mm, mhm,
We're going to work on that. Uh, and I've got my yoga flags, I've got, the symbols of my business
mm, mhm,
and my healing practices. Like I have a shell with sage in it and a lighter next
mm,
to it, and
mm.
like a little altar. So like things that represent healing to me, but then also things that represent me and who I am as a spiritual being and things that I do.
Wait, that's such a great concept to bring up, because I think sometimes people think they have to go to At Home or one of the decor stores and bring things in that are matching, that are trendy. I've walked into a lot of homes where the furniture is this really thick, giant wood, kind of old world furniture, and my thought is, do you love this? Do you love how heavy this is in the room? Well, it was handed down, or it was, so and so made this, which is like a legacy piece, but people think it's supposed to look a certain way. And my question is, where are you? Where are you in this space? I want to know. And the other thing is, again, we do a lot of playing small because it was be seen and not heard, or, stay quiet, or don't cry, or, we get a lot of preconditioned messages that follow us into adulthood.
Yes, most definitely. Most definitely. Man. Uh, and then, of course, we have to live in this space. Like you're here every day. You sleep here. You eat here. You use the bathroom here. You raise your kids in this space. Like there's so many things that happen in a home that I've always been kind of a utilitarian. I look for the utility of the object. I don't really care if it's beautiful as long as it has a purpose. And that tends to, maybe it's not beautiful in that moment. So I'd love to talk a little more about like moving within the spaces and
Mm.
how we live in these spaces.
I think it's a great discussion. I want to go back to what you said about the utility of things. In
Oh
Feng
yeah.
Shui, my goal is always, well, actually, the rule is always function and safety before beauty. We want to make sure it's safe, always, always. We want to make sure it works for us, and then we can think about the beauty of it. One of the things that we also look at is how what the purpose of something is going to be when it comes into the space. My husband and I have a what's the plan rule. So I'll say, what's the plan, Stan? What's the plan for that thing you're bringing in? His name's not Stan, but but it's a saying that works because it becomes, what's the plan? What's the plan for that stuff that we brought into the space? Everything in your space, if you're going to keep it, should have a grateful display or a beautiful storage. So if we have a collection of something and we want to display it because it's part of who we are, it needs to be a grateful display. Let's display that so we can share it, and it becomes part of the energy. If it's something we need to keep, we say let's give it a beautiful storage because we're still maintaining that grateful relationship. I was recently gifted a whole set of Christmas plates. I don't have room for them in my kitchen. We're bringing them out probably once or twice a year. So we bought some felt covered, beautiful storage so they'll be protected in the garage.
Yeah.
I still want to maintain the fact that that was gifted to me. I still want to love it. I want to be grateful for it. I can't use it right now, but I'm going to keep it there. People who do collections will group like things together, group like colors together, because that creates a congruence in the space.
Mm.
We talk about wayfinding, and when I walk into your space, there should be a logical way for me to move around. The essence of feng shui is bringing in qi, which is the energy of your space. We want that qi to come in. We want it to meander slowly through your space. The energy should flow slowly. When we have an uninterrupted hallway, we'll often say, let's add a sideboard, let's add a small table, a piece of artwork that's sequential, because that hastens our gaze. And it also asks the energy to slow down and bless us more slowly.
Hmm.
One of the other things I look for is there safety in moving around? If things feel dense, your body perceives that as a threat. Your nervous system will go, whoa, don't go in that room. Your body's going to brace, you're going to armor up, and there's that stress hormone again being released.
Yeah.
So if we walk into a space where again and again and again it's crowded, it's going to have a physiological effect.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's kind of thing that creates illness in your
Mhm,
body, right?
exactly right. It,
Yeah.
it our homes and how we react in a multisensory way gets us at a cellular level.
Yeah. Well, and the whole idea of dis-ease,
Mhm.
that our bodies are in dis-ease. When somebody said that to me about 15 years ago, I was like, wow. I'd never made that connection
Mhm.
between the word disease and
It's
dis-ease.
ease.
How your body is not at ease, that it's in a chaotic state. And
Mhm.
so honestly, I can see how our connections and our environment can create that kind of experience. I mean, I know that when women are suppressed, that leads to autoimmune illness later. There is science behind this now. So when how do we suppress ourselves in our
So
spaces?
sure. So I recently read a study. It was by Highland Medical University. I think that's the name of it. People can contact me if they want the exact citation. It, that said, women who perceive their space as cluttered have a higher level of cortisol. So we know that's the hormone, depending on what study you're believing, that's going to affect our wellness. It's going to affect our weight and how we eat and how we deal with our emotions. So that's important. There's scientific data more and more now coming about spaces in the last couple of years. I think that because there can be a full plate, for women and also men, but we're talking about women, is that we are kind of taking on all these roles, and one of the roles we forget to take on is deep rest. Is to say we need two types of rest. We need deep rest, and then we need active rest. So we need to rest without interruption, let our bodies recover. And then the other is what are the enrichment things you're doing to not be at work and not be doing all these other roles, but to be taking just for yourself. And I don't mean going to the spa and getting nails done and things like that, but what are the things that are enriching you?
Yeah.
Uh,
My
it's it,
jewelry, when I make
mm-hmm,
jewelry, I'm
sure.
sitting there in this creative energy and I'm feeling nourished by that experience. I feel
Mm-hmm.
that it's part of what I am here to do is create things.
Well,
So it's not just about creating like beautiful graphics. It's physical, tangible things.
and it's your spiritual food. It's the thing outside of everything else that's asking your body's asking you to do.
Hmm.
When we have nervous system dysfunction or nervous system disruption or emotional response, it keeps taking away energy from our cognitive function, because when we're in an emotional response, all of the energy is going to the organs to keep you alive.
Yep.
That's why people don't remember car accidents. They don't remember certain traumatic events, because guess what? Your cognitive function was taken offline so that your body could keep you alive, which is amazing when you think about. We have these beautiful systems that keep us alive at all costs. And you may still be living the experience that you needed to keep you alive. When things really mattered, you did a thing to keep you alive. We have to remind our bodies that, guess what, now we're safe, and we don't need to do that anymore. That takes layers, that takes titrated work. It's not a fast thing.
Agreed. Yes. I was actually in a car accident on February
Mm-hmm.
20th
Mm-hmm.
and the car rolled. It was scary. So when it happened, I lost consciousness. I
Mm-hmm.
hit my head. Like there's all kinds of things that happened. And
Mm-hmm.
after that experience, I couldn't remember bits and pieces of it. Like my brain left. And my physical body, the nervous system was completely dysregulated. So I
Mm-hmm.
was having experiences where like I would overheat for no
Mm-hmm.
reason whatsoever, or my heart rate would just go up
Mm-hmm.
and up higher than I'm used to, like way too intense. Like, wait a minute, something's weird here. I've actually had some craniosacral sessions
Mm-hmm.
to help me unwind that nervous system
Sure, sure.
response. Oh man,
So th-
powerful stuff.
that's a really good example. And first of all, I'm glad you were okay. I know that you experienced that. I was
Yeah.
glad to hear
Yeah.
you were doing well. But you give a perfect example, and let's step back to that a little bit, because when we have cognitive shutdown or executive function shutdown, our body is suppressing some of that memory, and that a lot of that happens in your amygdala, in your brain. So what we want to do is work with what's happening in the present day, your heart rate going up, your body shaking, all of the, and by the way, the thermal experience is not for no reason. Your body's going, okay, I'll save you now, because you had the terrible accident.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things we do in trauma work is to try and start to investigate what's happening in the present and say, how can we reframe that to give your body the opposite? How can we reframe that so your body understands that now you're safe? Somatic work is something that I'm working towards learning. I will have people do some simple somatic work in their homes. When we have stuck energy, a lot of times we will bring in fire element to sort of help the simmer, to help the energy move. And I will often use sound in a space because, as you know, sound is one of the biggest vibration movers. And our auditory is very connected to our nervous system. So we use sound in corners. We will use clapping, singing, bells. I often use tingshas to move energy. So somatically, we're very connected.
Yeah. Man, yeah, that's I can tell you that coming back into this space after the accident, I was acutely aware of my body
Mm-hmm.
and everything I had experienced and um reactivated the head injury,
Mm-hmm.
reactivated post what is it called? Post concussive syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have a history of TBI, so I've got like this brain that has been damaged. It's been injured a few times and it doesn't like to be injured. You
Absolutely
know?
not.
And I think that that was a lot of it when I first came back into the space is like my environment was just everything was on fire. Everything felt like it was wrong,
Yeah.
and like,
Well, yeah. So, I want to honor that experience because now your nervous system is going, what's that? What's that? What, threat, 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 threat.
mhm,
And so if I were to come into your house as a consultant, as a Feng Shui person, I would say, where are you building your resting spaces? Where are you allowing your body to recover? Is it still a kinetic space where you've got a to-do list and a calendar and a grocery list and doctor's appointments? Or are you taking the time to let your parasympathetic nervous system kick in and say, we're going to help your body, we're going to give you that rest and renew that you need, because when you've had a traumatic experience, you're always in that sympathetic nervous system state where your body's looking for that threat. So if I were to come in, I'd say, okay, what textures are we using? What kind of lighting are we using, especially with your history of TBI? I want to know what light feels comfortable, and that may change at different times during the day. I had a stroke. I'm very, very sensitive to young light. So if it's bright, 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 it's terrifying for me. Parts of me can shut down when that happens. So the lighting is low in here, but we have really good options for task lighting.
yeah,
And we were talking about Shelley James, the great lighting expert, and one of the things she says is that lighting is connected to self-worth. So it tells us how much we're valued in the way that we use our lighting. So that's something I also look for in spaces when I walk in.
interesting. Man, this has been fascinating.
It's
I'm
deep.
learning
It's
so
deep work.
much. My goodness. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the science because we said we'd get into the science of this and how well in the science really about how our spaces affect our physiology. So maybe you
Mm-hmm.
could talk a little more because we already touched on that
Yeah.
about the science and what people have been finding and how this affects us physiologically.
Sure. So, we've talked a little bit about nervous system and the body stuff. I think that people don't realize that they may be getting dysregulated again and again in their spaces because they have visual chaos, because they have mirrors that are fractured, decorative mirrors that have splices in them will fracture your self-worth. It will bring your self-esteem
Oh,
down. So there's a little
okay.
hint for everybody, a little feng shui tip.
Hmm.
Keep the mirror solid. We don't want any fractured or the vintage sort of hazy. Then we're not
Uh-huh.
sure who we are. We're not sure of our authenticness.
Huh. Okay.
Um, one of the things I've been reading about is hospital settings and bringing in and also assisted livings, bringing in biophilic elements. And by that, we mean elements from nature,
Okay.
because nature has a rhythm. Every time we get ungrounded, we need to go back to nature. Circadian rhythm plays a huge role in our hormone production, in our nervous system regulation, and in how we eat and sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm on a food allergy journey at this point in my 50s, and learning an incredible amount about the rhythm of nature and how that helps. People who have disrupted gut can be helped like that. So lighting is starting to be more and more ever present for me when I work with people. The other thing is, if we have too much, I work with visual stimuli because we want to modulate that so it's not the first evident thing in the space. People in culture now are kind of championing this maximist colorful lifestyle. Perfect, that's great. I want to know where you're celebrating color, but if all of your visual stuff is the first thing I notice when I get into the space and I can't turn my attention from it, I'm never going to talk to you. So
Right.
when we have that experience again and again, our bodies are trying to figure it out, and it causes stress ultimately in our bodies. The other places that I've read about are places like prisons, places like affordable housing, where we're creating big gardens, maybe not the prisons, but big garden areas in the middle of the housing units, where it can become um, um, a better experience, a more calming experience, with the biophilic element coming in. Part of Feng Shui is using the five elements. So we want to bring in moving water. Um, Water that, if we're in a house, we want the water to flow towards the house. So a water fountain at the front door ensures that weekly finances keep moving. That's the career area of your space. And bringing in fire elements in the form of triangles, star shapes, pointed items, pointed plants, red, fuchsias, anything candle, young, bright lighting, to really get things simmering and moving. We're coming out of kind of that farmhouse decorative where everybody had white kitchens. That's a lot of metal element in white. So that's going to cause arguments. It's going to cause people to be rigid and not flexible, not conversational. So the first thing I'm going to say is we're going to bring in a wood element, which is greens, blues, plants, things made of wood. And we're going to bring in a fire element to get that fire burning again.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. Very cool. I've always been about reducing chaos personally, because I believe that chaos is part of the reason that we don't find peace. It's if you're in chaos, you can't be peaceful. It's impossible. You can't have both at the same time.
Exactly right.
So reducing chaos for me, it's physical chaos, like what's going on in my physical body, but
Mhm.
emotional chaos could be environmental or your own environment, your trauma. So yeah.
So
So important.
I always know in a space when people are trying to figure things out, because there's a lot of starts and stops. We get a huge dopamine rush when we start a new project or we start a new thing, but then we jump to the next thing because we don't think that's for us. So it's a matter of being mindful and sitting with things. If I walk into a space and there's lots of individual objects that don't have relationship or congruence, then I say, what's all the stuff coming into the space for? What are you trying to figure out? Because you're bringing in fractures of ideas, pieces of ideas, and there's no congruent idea coming through. So your body, and you've experienced, your body goes, ooh, that feels like a lot of running around. That feels like a lot of stuff. I also am very, very sensitive to overcrowding in a space because of the way I move, because I walk with a limp on the left side. I'm very conscious of what's safe and what isn't. It's easy for me to lose balance. It's easy for me to bump into things. There's
Yeah.
lots of wide berths in my house. There's lots of open doorways in space that aren't cluttered.
Awesome. Yeah, that's I think something that I didn't it didn't occur to me until after we did it. I have this tiny little shelf. It's maybe about this wide. So, like what, 4 inches wide. And
Mhm.
there's very few places that this tiny little shelf fits. It's kind of tall and awkward. And so, right now, it's attached to the wall in between the bedroom door and the bathroom door in our bedroom. I
Mm.
run into it every single day.
Mhm.
Every single day without fail. Got bruises on my arm, you know.
So first of all, us old timers, we call that a CD shelf, right?
It's not though. It's so pretty. It might have held CDs at one point,
so
but it's so pretty because it's all ornate and pretty. And
so
yeah.
my bet is that your body is even bracing before you run into it because it's been so repetitive.
Ah.
Notice next time you bump into it and go, "Ooh, did I brace first?" Because your body remembers that. And it may not be a huge stressor, but over time, your body's going to, I bet if you even remove it, your body's still going to brace a little bit.
Oh, sure. I
So
can see.
it would be something to
I
think
think
about.
we've talked about moving it a couple times because we both run into it. You
Mm.
know.
If you put a rug in front of that, a small throw rug or a mat, your body will immediately go, oh, I have to go around that.
Oh wow.
So I'm
Okay.
betting that will help. Um, I would have to see it to really know, but anything that pulls you towards something, we want to be careful of that. So the rug might be helpful, or face it a different way.
Hmm.
But my bet is your body still remembers what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. It's just all of this is so interesting because like you don't think about these things. It's just not something that really occurs to you until you really start perceiving how your space is affecting you.
So
And that takes a little bit more mindfulness than I think a lot of us
yeah.
even.
And the word we use in Feng Shui is, well, first of all, mindfulness. It's so hard to sit in the space.
Hmm.
When I taught meditation for 12 years back east, and we always said sit in the space with whatever's happening. We call it sitting in the fire if you are into the yamas and niyamas. And to sit in that fire is really uncomfortable, but that is the space where we grow, right? The other thing is the word we use in Feng Shui always is intentional arranging, deliberate design, because we want to arrange the space so that it works to support us when we need it. One of my very first clients, I went into his relationship area and he had these two great red chairs, but they were pointing forward next to each other. Well, if I want to talk to somebody, I want to be able to see them. I don't want to have to keep turning. So he said, okay, I'll move it. And he put them right across from each other. Well, it's not an interrogation. It's not the FBI questioning you. We want a conversational, warm opportunity. So we angled them so that I can sit like this and talk to you and still see you. Oftentimes on patios, we will see that as well. And in Feng Shui, we look at everything that's under a roof. That may include the garage, it may not. It may include a patio, it may not.
Mhm.
But on her patio, we said, let's angle these chairs so we're inviting in friendliness, friends, relationships. All of that intentionality matters.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, this is amazing. Okay, cool. Is there anything else you want to cover?
Just that I encourage people, your relationship with your space is reciprocal. It's always reciprocal. What you give to it, it's going to support you back. I have a ritual where I show gratitude to my house almost every morning. I work with the archangels. That's the woo-woo side of things. But there should be good flow in your house. There should be flow and safety.
Oh, and safety.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think I'm gonna walk through this house and see it completely differently now.
See what you attune to for sure. I'm so grateful we could have this conversation. We're both in Arizona, which is nice. And you know how the houses are built.
Hmm.
So we get to offer a different vision of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you, Cynthia. This has been so much fun.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm glad you're well. I'm glad you're doing well, and I appreciate the time.
Definitely. Awesome. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, and before we go,
Oh, something
I forgot
else.
a really important part. How can people reach you?
Oh, perfect question. So on Instagram, on Facebook, Asteya Studios Feng Shui. One might say interior space support. You can Google me. You can find me at asteyastudios.com. I'm speaking the 19th of this month. You can go to International Feng Shui Guild. It's ifsguild.org. Um, you can contact Stephanie to get to me if you would like. Definitely follow the socials. Follow the socials, Instagram especially.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank
Okay,
you for that.
let's
Thank
do
you.
that
We almost
again. Thank
forgot.
you
We
so
were.
much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been so much fun.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. Woo!
Good job.